You say you've been praying, but have you really been believing? You fold your hands, whisper the words, maybe even cry a little, but deep inside there's hesitation. You send your prayers up, but your heart is already planning for disappointment. You talk about faith, yet every time God is silent, you start rehearsing your fears instead of reinforcing your faith. You've mistaken praying for hoping, and hoping for believing. There's a difference. Most people pray like they're writing a wish list, not like they're waging war. They speak words but don't stand on them. They ask God to move but don't expect Him to. And then they wonder why heaven feels quiet. But here's the truth. Heaven doesn't respond to noise. It responds to faith. And faith isn't proven by what you say once. It's proven by what you keep saying when nothing changes. You keep wondering why your prayers feel powerless. It's because your persistence has a pulse problem. The moment resistance shows up, your faith flatlines. You pray one day, doubt the next, and give up the third. You've let your emotions decide your consistency with God. You pray when you feel inspired, when you feel desperate, or when life gets heavy. But true prayer isn't built on feelings. It's built on fire. It's not about the volume of your voice. It's about the conviction of your heart. You say, I've been praying for so long and nothing's happening. But maybe something is happening. It's just not happening where you're looking. Maybe God is shifting things in the unseen, testing whether your faith can outlast your frustration. Maybe He's teaching you that real prayer isn't about getting your way. It's about getting His will inside your heart. Because if you got everything you asked for when you asked for it, you'd never learn what trust really means. Prayer is supposed to stretch you. It's supposed to expose what you actually believe. Anyone can pray when they see results. It takes a different kind of spirit to pray when nothing moves, when the silence feels endless, when it seems like God's ignoring you. That's where persistence is born, in the waiting rooms of unanswered prayers. That's where faith matures, where spiritual muscle grows, where dependency becomes devotion. You keep thinking the power of prayer lies in the words themselves, but the truth is, the power is in the staying say. It's in the relentless return to the same place of surrender, over and over again. Even when your circumstances mock you, you've got to stop treating prayer like a vending machine where you insert your faith and expect a miracle to drop. Prayer isn't a transaction, it's a transformation. It's the conversation that reshapes your heart until it starts beating in rhythm with heaven. Here's the harsh truth. Sometimes your prayers don't move God because they never moved you. You repeat the same lines without letting them touch your soul. You say you trust Him, but you plan your backup route in case He doesn't come through. You've built your faith around control, not surrender. And that's why it keeps breaking down under pressure. God isn't waiting for you to sound spiritual. He's waiting for you to be irreal, to come to Him with raw honesty, not rehearsed faith. When was the last time you prayed like you meant it? Not the kind of prayer that checks a box, but the kind that shakes the walls of your comfort zone. When was the last time your prayer came from a place so deep that your words ran out and only your spirit could speak? That's what persistence looks like. It's not eloquent, it's not polished, it's gritty, it's desperate. It's you refusing to let go of God's promise even when your reality laughs in your face. And maybe that's exactly what God is waiting to see. That you're not here for quick blessings or spiritual shortcuts. That you're not praying just for relief, but for revelation. That you're not chasing outcomes, but intimacy. Because prayer isn't about convincing God to show up. It's about convincing your heart to stay grounded in faith when everything shakes, to stay committed when your emotions fade, to stay aligned when the world distracts you. The truth is, God doesn't respond to momentary desperation. He responds to consistent devotion. You can cry out once and feel better, but that's not persistence. Persistence is praying again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until your heart no longer trembles at the delay. It's choosing to believe that every no, every silence, every closed door still carries His fingerprints. So before you say your next prayer, ask yourself this: are you praying from a place of faith or frustration? Are you praying to connect or to control? Because persistent prayer doesn't beg, it believes, it doesn't panic, it trusts, it doesn't quit when nothing changes, it doubles down on the word and refuses to retreat. You say you've been praying. Good. But now it's time to persist, distia, because God isn't looking for people who pray perfectly. He's looking for people who pray relentlessly. People who keep knocking even when the door doesn't move. People whose faith refuses to die in the waiting. That's where power lives, in the persistence, not the performance. Let's be honest, you want results, not resistance. You want a God who answers instantly, not one who teaches through silence. You want miracles without the waiting, blessings without the breaking, victories without the process. But that's not how heaven operates. God is not a genie responding to commands, He's a father building your character. And persistence in prayer isn't about bending His will, it's about strengthening yours. The truth is, most people don't stop praying because they stopped believing in God. They stop because they started doubting themselves. They think maybe their prayers don't matter, maybe their words aren't powerful enough, maybe heaven forgot their name. But that's the lie. The enemy doesn't have to destroy your faith. He just has to drain your consistency, because a distracted believer is just as powerless as a doubtful one. You say, but I've been praying for months, years even. Yes, and maybe that's exactly how long it takes for your faith to grow roots deep enough to survive any storm. God doesn't hand out breakthroughs like fast food. He cultivates them like seeds. You plant your prayer today, and He waters it with silence, pressure, and time. You don't see the roots growing underground, but they are. Every no, every not yet, every unanswered plea is preparing something in you, something stronger than quick results could ever give. You think God is testing your patience, but really, He's testing your posture. Will you still pray when the outcome doesn't flatter your ego? Will you still worship when the answer looks like rejection? Will you still trust Him when He says wait instead of yes? That's the part most people can't handle, because they want faith that feels good, not faith that stretches them. But God doesn't grow you through comfort. He grows you through continuation. Through the days you get on your knees and feel nothing. Through the moments your heart breaks and your mouth still whispers, I trust you. Through the nights you cry, but still choose to thank Him. That's where spiritual fire is forged. That's where warriors of faith are built. Not in answered prayers, but in unanswered ones that you refuse to stop praying. You've been asking, why does God make me wait? Maybe because waiting reveals your true motives. It separates the seekers from the quitters. It shows whether you wanted God's presence or just His presence. Waiting exposes your spiritual endurance. And if you can only pray when you're getting what you want, you were never praying. You were negotiating. Understand this, the delay isn't punishment, it's precision. God delays because He's aligning everything perfectly. He delays because He's protecting you from the version of success that your character can't yet sustain. You think you're ready, but God sees the cracks in your foundation. He knows if He gives you what you're asking for too early, it'll collapse under the weight of your immaturity. So He waits, not because He's forgotten you, but because He's forming you. And that's the part your flesh hates. You want a quick blessing, but God wants a lasting transformation. You want a miracle in your hands, but He wants faith in your heart. You want convenience, He wants commitment. You want relief, He wants relationship. That's the difference between those who pray and those who persist. Most people give up right before the shift. They walk away when heaven is seconds away from moving. They assume silence means absence. But silence is often the sound of God working behind the curtain. The moment you think nothing's happening is usually when everything is. That's why persistent prayer matters. It keeps you positioned when the miracle finally arrives. And here's a harsh truth. God's not impressed by your passion, He's moved by your perseverance. You can cry, shout, and worship for one night, and still live in doubt the next morning. But the ones who keep showing up, the ones who keep knocking on the same door, the ones who refuse to walk away no matter how long it takes, those are the ones who see heaven open. So stop rushing divine timing. Stop assuming that slow means no. Stop thinking that waiting means wasting. Every second of silence is shaping you into someone who can handle the blessing when it comes. You may not see it now, but your persistence is proof that you still believe God is good, even when life doesn't look like it. Heaven is not waiting for the perfect prayer. It's waiting for the persistent one, the one that keeps coming back, the one that won't let go. The one that says, I'm not here for what you can give me. I'm here because I still believe you're faithful. That's where the power lies, not in the words, not in the moment, but in the endurance that refuses to bow to silence. You've been praying and watching the clock. You've been asking and waiting for movement, a sign, a shift, something. But what if the movement you've been waiting for isn't out there at all? What if it's supposed to happen in you first? You're measuring progress, what you see, but God measures it by what's being reshaped inside your spirit. You keep asking for open doors, but He's trying to open your heart. You're begging Him to change your situation, but He's trying to change your reaction to it. You keep thinking the delay means you're stuck, but maybe you're being strengthened. You think you're waiting on God, but maybe God is waiting on you to grow, to surrender, to mature into the person who can handle the answer. Because truthfully, if He gave you what you're praying for right now, you might destroy it with the same impatience that's making you doubt Him. You want to move forward, but your spirit is still anchored in frustration. You want a breakthrough, but your mindset hasn't broken yet. You keep saying, God, change my circumstances, while He's whispering, no, I'm changing near you. And that's the part that most people miss. God's greatest work often happens in the invisible places, inside your mind, inside your character, inside your ability to stay faithful when nothing feels fair. You pray for peace, but then you keep feeding your mind with fear. You ask for strength, but you keep running from struggle. You cry for clarity, but you avoid silence, the very place where God speaks. You've trained yourself to look for proof instead of presence, and that's why your spirit feels restless. You want to see something happen through you, but God wants to build something through you. So He starts refining you, quietly, slowly, deliberately. He lets pressure expose the parts of you that weren't real faith, just convenience. He lets waiting strip away the pride that thought you could control the outcome. He lets disappointment reveal the difference between believing in Him and believing in what you wanted from Him. And the longer you persist, the more your heart starts to understand that prayer isn't about getting things, it's about becoming someone. You keep looking for answers, but God is giving you awareness. You keep asking for blessings, but He's giving you backbone. He's showing you that faith isn't proven in comfort, it's proven in endurance. It's proven when you pray, even after the no, when you thank Him even through the tears, when you show up again and again, not because you feel powerful, but because you've learned that prayer is your lifeline, not your last resort. This is where transformation begins, not when things around you shift, but when something inside you does, when your spirit stops begging and starts believing. When your heart stops chasing control and starts choosing surrender. When your prayers stop sounding like complaints and start sounding like declarations. That's when you know you're growing. That's when persistence stops feeling like pain and starts feeling like purpose. God doesn't just want to answer your prayer. He wants to make you ready for the answer. He's preparing your hands to hold what you've been asking for. He's building spiritual muscle that can carry the weight of your calling. You keep asking Him to move mountains, but He's trying to make you the kind of person who can climb them. So stop assuming that silence means absence. Maybe it's surgery. Maybe he's cutting out the doubt, the impatience, the pride that keeps choking your faith. Maybe he's rearranging your heart so it can recognize his will when it comes. Maybe he's teaching you that before he changes what's around you, he has to change what's within you. You've been praying for a breakthrough, but the real miracle might be this: that your faith is still alive, even after everything tried to kill it. That you're still praying, still believing, still showing up. That's not weakness, that's transformation. Because persistence in prayer doesn't just move God's hand, it molds your heart. And that change inside you, that's the first sign that heaven's already moving. You think unanswered prayers mean God forgot you, that he's ignoring your pain, overlooking your faith, turning a deaf ear to your cries. But what if unanswered prayers are not rejection? They're a redirectioner. What if the silence you hate is actually the mercy you need? Because sometimes what you're begging for isn't ready for you. Or worse, you're not ready for it. You want blessings, but not the discipline that sustains them. You want miracles, but not the maturity that manages them. You want divine favor, but not the obedience that keeps it. You see, God's timing isn't punishment, it's protection. You're asking him to open a door that he knows will crush you if he opens it too soon. You're praying for relationships that would pull you away from your purpose. You're pleading for opportunities that would destroy your focus. And because he loves you more than you love your comfort, he withholds. You call it delay, heaven calls it development. You call it unanswered, God calls it unseen preparation. You think he's being silent, but he's actually setting the stage, arranging what you can't see, removing what you'd never let go of on your own. Every no is a shield, every wait is a wall built to protect what he's still perfecting in you. You want him to prove his power, but he wants you to trust his wisdom. You see, we've been taught to equate blessing with ease, but that's not how heaven works. God doesn't hand out comfort. He crafts capacity. He's not trying to make your life easier. He's trying to make your faith stronger. That's why sometimes he'll hold back what you want until you grow into who you're meant to be. You can't carry a destiny that your character can't sustain. And if he gave you everything you asked for now, your faith might collapse under the weight of your own prayer. Think about it. If every request was answered instantly, you'd never learn to trust, you'd just learn to expect. Faith would become entitlement, and prayer would turn into manipulation. So God delays, not to punish, but to purify, to strip away the motives you didn't know were there, to remind you that prayer is not a tool to control him, it's a process that he changes you. You keep asking for blessings, but God's not a careless giver. He won't hand a crown to someone still afraid of carrying a cross. He won't send success to a heart that still bows to fear. He won't release what could ruin you. So he waits. He hides certain answers behind the walls of your own growth. And every time you keep praying despite the silence, you're showing him that you're finally becoming the kind of person who can handle his yes. Here's the truth. Most people won't tell you. Sometimes God's no is his greatest kindness. Because he sees the full picture, you can't. You're staring at one chapter, crying over what you lost, while he's already written an ending that redeems it all. You think he's forgotten your prayer, but he's actually building an answer far greater than the one you imagined. His silence isn't neglect, it's strategy. His delay isn't distance, it's design. And yet, this is where most people lose their faith. They misinterpret the pause as punishment. They confuse divine protection for divine rejection. They walk away from prayer right before heaven was about to move. But those who persist, who stay, who trust, who keep their hearts open when nothing makes sense, those are the ones who see what others miss. They discover that every unanswered prayer carries a lesson. Every closed door has a hidden mercy. Every waiting season hides a miracle with your name on it. So stop assuming that silence means God has turned his back on you. Maybe He's just guarding what He promised. Maybe He's protecting you from the version of yourself that can't yet handle the blessing you're begging for. You're praying for open doors, but He's saying, not yet, because I'm still preparing you to walk through them without falling. That's love. That's divine strategy. That's the power behind every unanswered prayer. Not punishment, but preparation. God's not withholding because He's cruel. He's withholding because He's careful. Because when He finally releases what's yours, it won't slip through your hands. It'll stay. It'll multiply. It'll glorify Him. And you'll finally understand why the waiting was necessary. Because the silence wasn't killing your faith. It was approving it. Persistent prayer isn't about begging God to do something faster. It's about learning to align your heart with His pace. It's about staying in the conversation long enough for your desires to start sounding like His will. Because real prayer doesn't twist God's arm. It trains your spirit. It breaks your need to control outcomes and teaches you to trust timing. The power of persistence is not in how loudly you pray, but in how long you keep believing after heaven goes quiet. You've been told that if you just pray harder, God will move. But the truth is, God isn't moved by pressure. He's moved by alignment. Persistent prayer isn't you trying to convince God to agree with your plan. It's you slowly surrendering until you start agreeing with His. The more you persist, the more your perspective changes. You start realizing that prayer isn't about chasing results. It's about becoming rooted in relationship. You stop obsessing over what's happening and start resting in who you're talking to. At first you pray for what you want. You pray for comfort, for clarity, for things to make sense. But the longer you stay in that posture of prayer, the more something inside you begins to shift. You start praying differently. You stop asking, "Why, God?" and start asking, "What are you showing me through this?" You stop praying for the storm to end and start praying for strength to stand in it. You stop treating prayer like an escape and start using it as an anchor. That's the power of persistence. It purifies your motives. It pulls your heart out of panic and places it back into purpose. It transforms your tone from demanding to trusting. You begin to understand that the goal isn't to get an answer. The goal is to stay aligned until you become the kind of person who doesn't need to see to believe. You start to feel peace even when the problem remains. You start to trust that the silence is not absence, it's strategy. When you pray persistently, you're not trying to change God's mind. You're allowing Him to reshape yours. You begin to see that not every delay is dangerous. Not every no is rejection. Not every obstacle is punishment. Sometimes God keeps you waiting because He's syncing your heart with His timing. And when that alignment happens, you'll look back and realize the waiting was never wasted. Every unanswered prayer was preparing your spirit to handle what's coming. Persistent prayer is spiritual training. It teaches you how to stand when everything in you wants to quit. It develops endurance in a generation that's addicted to instant results. It reminds you that faith is not proven by how passionately you start praying, but by how faithfully you keep praying after nothing changes. Every time you return to that place of surrender, tired, frustrated, but still believing, your roots grow deeper. You stop being shaken by what you see because you've learned to trust what you know. And that's when things start shifting. Not always externally, but internally. Your heart gets quieter. Your confidence in God becomes unshakable. You stop chasing signs because you've learned to recognize His voice. You no longer pray from panic, you pray from peace. You no longer approach God like a stranger, you walk with Him like a friend. That's what persistent prayer does. It turns faith from a moment into a lifestyle. You see, miracles don't always begin when God moves. They begin when you finally align. When your will, your words, and your worship start moving in rhythm with heaven. That's when your prayers carry weight. Not because they're perfect, but because they're pure. not because you're powerful, but because you're connected. So stop trying to rush the process. Stay in the presence. Keep your heart tuned to the frequency of divine timing. The more you persist, the more you'll realize that the waiting room is where heaven does its deepest work. Because God doesn't just answer persistent prayers, He transforms the people who pray them. You say you want to see miracles, but miracles don't come to the casual. They come to the committed. They come to the ones who refuse to stop praying when it feels pointless. The ones who show up when the excitement fades, when the tears dry, when the silence feels unbearable. You want God to move, but you've been treating prayer like a backup plan instead of a battle plan. You turn to Him when you're desperate, not when you're devoted. And that's why your prayers lose power. Because your faith only works when life does. You can't live half-surrendered and expect full blessings. You can't pray for God's will while secretly preparing your own. You can't expect divine intervention while still clinging to human control. Faith isn't proven by the moments you feel inspired. It's proven in the moments you feel ignored. It's easy to believe when everything aligns, but true faith keeps its posture even when everything falls apart. You keep saying, God, if you just answer this one prayer, I'll never doubt again. But that's not faith, that's negotiation. And God doesn't negotiate with unbelief. He moves when your faith stops flinching, when you stop praying from fear and start praying from conviction, when you start saying, even if nothing changes, I still believe you're working. That's when heaven starts leaning in. Prayer is not your spare tire. It's your steering wheel. It's not what you reach for when you're stranded. It's what keeps you from crashing. You can't keep running to prayer only when you've run out of options. You must learn to live in it, breathe in it, move through it. Because prayer isn't just how you get through storms. It's how you learn to walk on water in the middle of them. You say you have faith, but faith without persistence is just optimism in disguise. Optimism fades when life gets dark, but faith digs deeper. Faith doesn't need proof to keep believing. It doesn't demand signs, it creates them. It doesn't wait for the door to open. It keeps knocking until heaven's hinges wear out. And that's what separates the average believer from the unshakable one: persistence. God doesn't answer prayers that are spoken out of panic. He answers prayers that are rooted in trust. When you pray, He's not listening to how desperate your words sound. He's listening to whether your heart still believes what your mouth is saying. That's why some prayers shake heaven and others don't. Because one is born from fear and the other is born from faith that refuses to die. Let's be honest, too many people give up right before the breakthrough. They stop praying because the delay feels personal. They mistake the waiting for abandonment. But faith that quits in silence was never faith. It was expectation built on control. If your belief collapses when heaven is quiet, it means your confidence was never in God, it was in getting your way. The ones who see the impossible are the ones who keep praying after the world tells them to stop. They keep showing up with the same passion, the same hunger, the same fire, even when every sign says nothing's happening. And that's when God moves. Not because your persistence changes Him, but because it changes you into someone He can trust with the miracle. Stop letting your emotions dictate your devotion. Stop letting your impatience decide when your faith expires. Stop treating prayer like an experiment to see if God works. Treat it like the evidence that He already does. You can't walk in divine power with half-hearted faith. You can't pray powerfully with a divided mind. You have to choose to believe. Every day, every moment, especially when you feel like giving up. That's the test. That's the fire that separates the real from the religious. Because anybody can pray once, but only the persistent can pray until heaven breaks open. The miracle isn't in the moment, it's in the momentum. Every time you pray again, you prove that faith is alive. Every time you refuse to give up, you declare that your trust is stronger than your fear. God doesn't need perfect people. He needs consistent ones. The ones who stay at his feet when everyone else walks away. The ones who don't need signs to believe, who don't need comfort to stay committed, who don't need applause to keep going. Those are the ones who move mountains. Those are the ones who make heaven respond. Because when your prayer life becomes persistence, heaven recognizes the sound of your voice, not as noise, but as faith that will not quit. And when faith refuses to quit, God refuses to stay silent. Prayer doesn't change God. It changes you. That's the truth most people never understand. You think prayer is about making God move, but it's about making you already. Every time you pray, something shifts inside you. Maybe not in your circumstances, but in your perspective, your patience, your peace. Persistent prayer chisels away at everything that doesn't belong in you. Fear, pride, doubt, control, until what's left is faith that can't be shaken. You've been thinking that prayer is what gets you the blessing, but prayer is the blessing. It's not a transaction, it's a transformation. Every time you kneel down, every time you whisper that same prayer again and again, heaven is carving something eternal into your soul. You're learning what dependence really means. You're learning what surrender actually feels like. You're learning that the goal was never comfort. The goal was a closeness. You see, God doesn't always fix the situation because sometimes He's fixing the person inside it. You want Him to change your world, but He's using your world to change you. See, you're asking Him to calm the storm, but He's teaching you how to sleep through it. You want Him to remove the mountain, but He's building the strength in your legs to climb it. Persistent prayer is God's workshop. It's where He molds hearts, breaks egos, and replaces panic with peace. You say you want strong faith. This is how it's built. Through unanswered questions and unending prayers. Through seasons where you have no proof except a promise. Through nights where you feel forgotten, but still whisper His name anyway. Every amen you speak through tears becomes a brick in the foundation of unshakable trust. Every time you choose faith over frustration, you are proving that your hope is more than words. It's a real. Yeah. And here's the thing. Prayer doesn't just reveal who God is. It reveals who you are. It exposes the depth of your dependence, the honesty of your heart, the purity of your motives. It forces you to face the truth about your own faith, whether it's rooted in comfort or conviction. It's easy to say you trust God when everything works, but when nothing does, that's when the truth shows. That's when prayer stops being habit and becomes your heartbeat. Persistent prayer strips away your illusions of control. It teaches you that you never had power, only access. Access to the one who is a power. And the more you pray, the more that realization starts to live inside you. You start walking differently. You stop worrying about what you can't change because you've learned where to lay it down. You stop trying to force outcomes because you finally understand that surrender is stronger than striving. That's why the people who pray persistently carry a different peace. They're not unbothered because life is easy. They're unbothered because they've learned who holds the outcome. Their faith is no longer emotional, it's foundational. They've been through silence, they've been through waiting, and they realize that God's presence is more powerful than any answer. They no longer chase results, they radiate resilience. You might not notice it, but persistent prayer has already changed you. Look at the patience that didn't exist before. Look at the strength you gain from holding on. Look at the quiet confidence that wasn't there when you first started. That's transformation. That's proof that God was working even when you thought nothing was happening. So understand this. Prayer is not about getting your way. It's about getting God's heart. It's not about escaping the fire. It's about discovering who you become in it. The miracle isn't just when your situation changes. It's when you do, when your mind becomes steady, your heart becomes humble, your faith becomes fearless. When you can finally say, even if it never happens, He's still good. Because that's when you know you've been changed. When your peace no longer depends on outcomes, but on the one who never fails. That's the quiet power of persistent prayer. It doesn't just bring heaven closer. It makes heaven live inside you. Now is the time to stop treating prayer like a hobby and start treating it like a lifeline. No more half-hearted whispers. No more giving up because nothing looks different yet. No more measuring God by the speed of your answers instead of the depth of your faith. You've been given the privilege of persistent prayer, and persistent prayer demands persistent action. It demands that you show up over and over with the same fire, the same belief, the same refusal to quit. You may be tired, you may be frustrated, you may feel like giving up, but that's exactly the moment your faith needs to rise. The breakthrough is closer than you think, and most people never reach it because they walk away too soon. Don't let that be you. Don't let impatience or doubt dictate your destiny. Keep praying, keep believing, keep standing, keep speaking the same words, even when your reality screams stop. Understand this: heaven responds to persistence. God doesn't move because you beg louder, He moves because your faith refuses to die. Every time you pray again, every time you rise above fear and frustration to kneel once more, you are proving something powerful: that your hope is alive, that your trust is unwavering, that your spirit refuses to settle for less than His will. That is the energy that opens doors. That is the force that shakes mountains. That is the power that transforms lives. So take a stand today. Decide that your prayers will not be seasonal or situational. Decide that your faith will not be dictated by circumstances. Decide that you will keep knocking, keep asking, keep believing, no matter how long it takes. Let your persistence become your signature. Let your refusal to quit become the evidence of your trust. Let your faith outlast the delay and outshine the doubt. Because here's the final truth: the God you're praying to is not impressed by your words. He's moved by your consistency. He's not looking for perfection. He's looking for perseverance. And when you persist, when you refuse to give up, when you stay in the fight even when it feels hopeless, you align yourself with power that cannot fail. So go back to your knees. Pray with fire. Pray with hope. Pray with a conviction that will not let silence define you. Pray with persistence until heaven bends, until your breakthrough comes, until your faith is no longer tested but triumphant. Your prayers matter. Your persistence matters. Your life matters. And the moment you decide to refuse giving up, that is the moment miracles have no choice but to live.